Welcome to the Cultivating Curiosity part 3. This is part 3 of our webinar series, 3 of 3. We've had 2 incredible webinars so far, and we're really excited to have Dan and Shelly here with us today to join us for part 3. I would like to acknowledge that this project is supported by the Ministry of Agriculture and Food. So I'll tell you a little bit more about that moving forward. But for now, I wanted to start off with acknowledging that I am joining today from the Tsimshian territory up in northwestern BC. I think as we learn more about creating and supporting food, school systems, and food systems as a community and as a whole, I think it's really important to take a moment to acknowledge and appreciate those who have stewarded the land before us. We'd be really grateful. I know folks are calling in from all over the province today, so we'd be really grateful if you were able to share your name and the territory from where you're calling from today. Megan has put a link in the chat. If you're not sure whose territory you're calling in from, you can peek on that website there, and that'll give you more information about your area. So just a quick overview of the webinar and how things are going to go today. We're going to have a welcome and opening for about 5 minutes. Then we're going to do a little quick intro into Farm to School BC and a project overview. Then we'll have the presentation from Daniel and Shelly on Haida Gwaii. And then we'll keep all of our questions to the end. I know there'll be lots of questions for them and their process, but we'll be keeping the questions until the end, opening it up for a Q&A, and then we'll have a closing and thank you. As you may have heard when you joined, this webinar is being recorded and will be available on YouTube after the fact for you to reference back to, or for those folks who weren't able to join us in real time. So I'm just going to get rid of this. Great. All right, so we'll start off with a little bit about Farm to School BC. For those of you who aren't familiar, we have been active for 18 years. We have 8 staff members spanning 5 regional hubs across the province. We do fund programs in schools, and we are currently, we have about 53,445 students who have been reached by our program, which is really exciting. So you can see a little bit more on this page, a little bit more of a snapshot of kind of what are some of the examples of how projects look in schools. We do fund a variety of school food programs and prioritize rural and remote and First Nation schools in our funding model. On the slide here, you can see some of the examples from across the province. Our funding cycle usually opens up in the fall of each year. So the best way to stay in the loop for that, if that's something you're interested in, is to follow us on social media or to sign up for our newsletters, which you can also do on our Farm to School BC website. And Megan popped that link in the chat just a little bit further up. So in terms of our Farm to School BC projects, in addition to funding schools, we also work on a variety of other projects. A couple of them you can see listed here. Rise Up, which was a youth engagement project, Pollinator Awards, where we award and honor and celebrate those who are doing great work in their school food community. And then Spring Celebration, supporting schools as well to kind of celebrate and have events to help really highlight some of the incredible things that schools are doing and school food projects. Also on our website, you can find Farm to School BC educator resources. So here's a few just listed here: the Learning from the Land Toolkit, the Hands-on Food, and the Guide to Growing a School Farm. There's lots more on the website that you can find by visiting there as well. And we have a few new ones that are going to be coming out this fall, which we're really excited to share about. Again, you can find out more about those and when they go live on our social media and through our newsletters. So this project, the Cultivating Curiosity webinar series, is part of a broader project that has been supported by the Ministry of Agriculture and Food. The first kind of aspect to this project is the webinar series. We've done, as I mentioned at the beginning, this is the 3rd of 3 webinars highlighting schools and educators with agriculture courses across the province. We will be doing we will be creating a resource from these webinars that'll be available for download on our website, and we'll be launching that resource in the fall. So there'll be another webinar that's going to accompany of that coming up in the fall. So stay tuned for that a little bit later. There's some engagement opportunities as well with this project. So connecting with other educators who are looking to develop agricultural courses or who have already developed agriculture courses. So we have that through a file sharing platform as well as the email group. Again, we'll have more in a coming slide. I'll have a little bit more information on how to engage in that. Field trip funding, so those folks who attend at least 2 of the 3 webinars, as well, who are able to engage, or there's additional opportunities for engagement as well, and filling out the pre and post survey, you'll be eligible for field trip funding. I'll get into those details a little bit more. And then the resource developed, as I mentioned, we will be capturing these learnings as well as additional case studies and further information that'll be available as a downloadable resource, which will be available in the fall. So the next slide just outlines what the webinar series was. Again, we're on part 3. We're really excited to have Daniel and Shelly here with us. We had Crystal Tenbrink and Aaron Eitzevic from Howe Sound Secondary School in part 2. And then we had Joe Massey and Tanya Toth from Sardis Secondary School in part 1. They were both incredible webinars. There was so much information that our presenters shared, a lot of really inspiring stories of how they got their school food programming started, where there's curriculum connections, how they're building school food courses, BAA courses, and all the different sort of parts and pieces that go along with all those projects. So if you haven't tuned into those, I would definitely encourage you to go back and watch the webinar recordings, because I think there's some really valuable information that can be gleaned from those presenters. So a little bit more about the engagement piece of this project. So we have a couple different options. We have our resource sharing. So this is looking for educators who have great resources already created to be able to share it with other folks. We really want to create a bit of a cohort within this project where folks can share with each other, connect with each other, and kind of build off things that are already happening across the province. So through the file storage and the networking are a couple different options of ways that we're hoping to do this. So the file storage is a place to upload files, course materials, guides, lesson plans, and presentations, or anything else you have developed that you think might be helpful to share it with other educators. We have some great resources already placed in there from educators, which is really exciting to see. And then we have an opportunity for real-time connection through a group email with questions and connections in that. So we've had lots of great conversations coming out of our past 2 webinars there, where the presenters are on that group email. So any questions that kind of come up further down the line, you can circle back there and build connections, as well as with all the other folks who are engaged in that platform. Okay, the field trip funding grants. So we do have $1,000, 10 $1,000 grants available. So to be eligible to be entered into this lottery for the 10 of these field trip funds, you must attend at least 2 of the 3 webinars. That does have to be in real time. And then complete the pre and post survey questions. So everyone who's on the call will have completed the pre-survey questions. Those were just embedded in the Zoom registration, so you would have already completed those. We will be sending a follow-up email with the post-survey questions. So you do need to make sure you complete those in order to be eligible. By joining the email group, you can have an additional entry. And then by uploading a document, you can also have an additional entry. Because we are getting close now to when we're going to be doing the draw for the field trips, we do have a deadline of Friday, May 30th to upload any additional documentation in order to be eligible. You can certainly upload beyond that, as well as joining the group email and connecting on that platform. But in order to have those counted as bonus entries, that will need to be done by May 30th. So just really quickly, since we are getting close to when we're going to be doing the field trip funding selection, the post survey questions, as I mentioned, will need to be completed. We'll be sending those out in a follow-up email from this webinar. If you registered as a group or you use a different email address, just shoot us a quick message just to make sure that we can track that and make sure that you're getting all the entries that should be associated with your name and with your email. These will be selected. We will be selecting the grants by June 9th. So you'll be receiving a notification if you were the successful recipient of one of those grants the week of June 9th. And we are going to be just using a lottery system for that. So everybody has yeah, all of the names will just sort of go in a hat and all the bonus entries, and we'll be doing a draw for that the week of June 9th. I think that covers that section. So I'm very excited to have Daniel Schulbeck from Daaxiigan S and Shelly Crack from Northern Health. I'll do a quick intro and then I'll pass it over to them. So Daniel Schulbeck has been teaching junior math and science for 25 years in both Toronto, Ontario and Masset, BC. 15 years ago, along with a colleague, Dan started an elective outdoor classroom alongside his bread and butter math and science workload. This elective has evolved into a local board-approved garden and gather class. Following the seasonal and traditional food cycles on Haida Gwaii, the work is to increase local food literacy in young people by hands-on engagement in growing, gathering, processing, storing, and enjoying food from here. Shelly Crack has been a registered dietitian with Northern Health for 20 years. She focused the first half of her career on providing community dietitian services to a variety of First Nations communities in northern British Columbia. Living and working on Haida Gwaii, an island off the coast of BC with an abundance of local and traditional food, has taught Shelley the importance of people's connections to their land and food. Shelley believes that serving traditional food from the land and sea in hospitals and schools supports all forms of well-being, including physical, emotional, and spiritual. So I will pass it over to Daniel and Shelley.
Hi, everybody. Let's see if I can get the PowerPoint up. Great.
That looks great, Daniel.
Great, thank you. Shelly, hi from across the waters.
Yes. So this is like one of the first times that Dan and I aren't sitting together, because I'm up in the Shimsham territory, Kitsalis, Kitsinkalem, First Nation, up in the Terrace area, but home soon on the ferry. And I just wanted to acknowledge where we are, which Dan has put a map up off the coast of British Columbia, and the red circle is our town. We live, work, and play on the sovereign lands of the Haida Nation, um, who have cared for the land and the sea and the food for time immemorial. And as Margot mentioned, I'm a registered dietitian. Dan's a fellow teacher. And I just want to acknowledge that registered dietitians have been part of a profession that have harmed Indigenous people over the years through residential school and Indian hospitals. And we know about food experiments, and these harms really play into the lives of people today. Um, and I think Dan and I both work in systems that can still be harmful, both the education and the healthcare system. And I'm excited for Dan to present on his work. And I think we both collectively like to think that some of the work that we're doing is contributing to. There's a Haida law called "Making It Right," but contributing to making spaces safer, specifically around traditional food. So I have a lot of respect for Dan's work. Happy to support him, and looking forward to presenting with him today. So over to you, Dan.
Thanks, Sean. It was working. I can't advance the slide. Any suggestions? Oh, okay. We'll figure it out. The first two slides that we would like to present to you are just providing some context of where we are, of the place that we are working in. In 25 years of teaching and attending seminars and trying to glean information to help me in my practice, I have realized that the context that the seminar is coming from is all important, because sometimes the information doesn't work for the setting that you're in. And sometimes if you know the context, you're able to filter and grab something that works for you. And that is my goal, is that everybody here, no matter what context you are teaching in, whether it's down on the lower mainland in a city school, or whether you're in an even more remote place than we are, that you're able to get something because you know what we're presenting out, and you're able to kind of do that translation, grab something, at least one thing, and run with it. And so this is us. Masset and Gaotlagi, we've got a total population of 1,400 people up on the north end of the island. In our high school, we have 70 kids. And some of my classes are as small as 4 kids, and some of them are as large as 20. 20 is a huge class for us. And I do know educators that are kind of chuckling and going, must be nice. And yeah, it is nice. Of course, being in a real setting, there's always pros and cons or pluses and minuses to every situation. And so this is our situation. So when we first started, there was a colleague of mine named Derek Schulbeck. That's my brother, Derek. This is the other Derek Seifert, and he was the English and socials teacher, and I was the math and science teacher. And so, we had all the academic courses for 8, 9, and parts of 10. And, we started collaborating together because for a couple reasons. We had a cohort coming in that were identified as hands-on learners. Like, these kids learn hands-on best, and there's a bit of a I don't know there's lots of different ways to talk about it, but traditional classroom was not quite in focus for them. Yeah, they're learned best from being out on the land, and we knew that when they were coming into grade 8, and so we were like, you know what? Let's try and figure something out. We've got some lead time. Derek and I would drive around the back roads hunting, and we'd talk shop, and we thought, you know what? We had a local EA, Charlotte Marks. She told us point blank, you guys should bring more local foods into your classroom. And so, she said that enough times to us, and we finally clicked and said, you know what, we're going to start an outdoor classroom where we bring students outside as parts of our course offerings, and then anchor and scaffold curriculum onto that. And so we went to the beaches and dug razor clams in this case. And it was an aha moment for us. We had students who would sit there with their hoodies up in the back of the classroom, and, I could see from their eyes that what I was offering was not what they were looking for. It was not in focus. And when we got out to the beach, all of a sudden, you could see them sharpen right up. And it was not any stretch for me to say, hey, I have no idea how to dig a razor clam. Can you show me how to dig a razor clam? And they'd be like, they'd give me a chuckle, they'd dig a clam and hand me the shovel, and I would dig in the beach. And sometimes I found a clam and sometimes I did not. And it was very interesting, how the dynamic between us shifted. And, so many things sprung out of that, which is really the basis of this program for me. One of the main things was this relationship was suddenly between a human and a human, an adult human and a younger human. And so between somebody who had something to offer and a younger person who was going to learn something, and vice versa in a different context, like on the beach, right? And what I found as a teacher, my teacher self, once we had that relationship, that kind of more informal relationship formed around food, then as a teacher, I was able to leverage that a little bit in the classroom when we started talking about, say, Pythagoras, right? I had a lot more leeway. I had a longer segment of time to get buy-in than I would have had we not engaged in this work. So for the first 2 years, our garden and gather class, that is now a garden and gather class, was really just field trips that we did out of math, science, socials, and English classes. We went to the beach, we dug clams. We went to the Yaccoon River and gill-netted fish. This was actually an amazing social studies culminating project. where one of the students went regularly to the river, like every year around actually this time. And he was gone for 3-4 weeks. And we're like, you know what? Social studies, do you want to bring us and host us down there at the river? And he's like, sure. And you know what? He brought us down and he immersed us into the pages of a social studies book. If I could, I'll just read a quote. My partner, Derek Seifert, was a brilliant writer. This is from him. Fish sustains life on Haida Gwaii. Fishing is a way of life. It feeds the local economy and it feeds locals. A field trip to a fish camp is a trip into the heart of a living culture. The pages of a social studies textbook come alive, not with pictures depicting how it was once done, but with immersion in the culture of today. A culture that owes much to the past, but also one that is living, one that continues today and will continue tomorrow. When we work on fish in the school, we build a bridge to that lived culture. We live it ourselves as we work on fish, cutting, canning, smoking, and sharing fish. We went out into the woods and we got some deer and we brought them back, and we had local either knowledge holders or students, if they were a little bit older and knew their business. They would lead groups of students in the butchering and the processing, and eventually it developed into preparing meals, full tablecloth. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but that was a meal project where, cooking with local foods was the goal. And the more local it was, the more points you got. And that was one of them. We go out chanterelle picking into the forest. There's me giving a little bit of a mycological lesson in the woods. And then we scramble around looking for mushrooms, spend the afternoon fishing for spawning coho. There's our catch. Kids just loving it and learning it. And, it's not just the day, it's then the processing day, and then it's the cooking day. And then you can always refer to those moments in a classroom, depending on what topic you come up with that links to those field trips. 2-3 years in, we thought it was time to kind of expand out. And Derek and I we co-taught this course. So we each had a half of an FTE for the teachers in the house. That's your teaching credits. We each had half of one, and we were co-teaching a garden and gather class. And Shelly came and introduced us to Farm to School. And Farm to School was flexible in their funding model and paid for a greenhouse that we erected. And now all of a sudden, we've got a greenhouse. So we've got indoor growing spaces, Haida Gwaii, West Coast, Northwest Coast, wet, right? So like having just a gardening class, you're not getting outside as often as you think you might be. But with a greenhouse, all of a sudden, now we have an indoor space and there's things that can be happening. Oh, come on. 20-foot by 50-foot greenhouse, 1,000 square feet inside. We have an additional 1,000 square feet of outside growing spaces. Let's go. Let's bring it into the classroom so that we're growing throughout the winter. We have 3 of these towers. I've had them for 7 years now, and I can tell you all up and down about them. Their pros, their cons. They do grow. They grow lettuce. All that lettuce now, we've got capacity, right? It's not just a few salads in the spring that we can offer students at the lunch program. We actually have a salad bar every Wednesday all year round. A note on our food program, it's universal, it's free, it's hot, and it's 5 days a week. And we try and get as much local food in as we can. And that percentage of local food going into that program is climbing year by year. It grows lettuce. I was asked to, at this point, talk about lessons learned through creating this program. Start small and grow as you can fit it. For me, I had like I said, a half of a FTE. So my garden and gather is slated opposite my prep. So I have it 2 or 3 times per week for an hour and 10 minutes each session. It's full now with things that are all things local. But I had to grow that. I had a lot of chalk and talks at the beginning where we talked about composting and microorganisms and concept about food miles and over the years I have added more and more activities that are actually hands-on out in the greenhouse, or in this case we're talking December. What do you do out in the garden in December? There are some things that you can do, but it's also the time to take things out of the freezer and secondarily process them, like taking meat that's been frozen, not whole, but like chunked and cubed and labeled as, to grind. And then it's time to learn how to use a grinder safely. And then what do you do with ground meat? You make sausages or you can it, right? There's a bone broth lesson in there. Can the bone broth, right? We're stocking our larders and learning secondary food processing skills like canning, like drying, like candying salmon. Ooh, that was a good one. We like that one. Like making jilts. For those who aren't familiar with jilts, dried salmon and or halibut. Absolutely got people through winters before canning and freezing. Um, you know, this was our on the right-hand side. That's our snack table. That's what the Universal Hot Lunch Program used to look like. It was a snack table because Shelly and I learned that high school students were kind of snatch and goers, grab and goers, as opposed to sit down and have a salad bar type people. And so we shifted the offering and it got actually more local and it got more utilized. With the help of Shelly's procurement capacities, which she'll talk about later this year, at an estimate, we probably did 3 dozen salmon, and we're probably up to about 10 halibut that we have processed in the classroom over the months where the gardens aren't keeping us busy. We've dried them, we've put them out, and students have enjoyed that clean, pure, local protein snack immensely. As our program grew and as Shelly became more and more involved, Derek drifted away and became involved in a food program down on Vancouver Island. Shelly, filled his shoes in some senses. One way that she really helped the program out was by using her connections with elders and knowledge keepers to introduce me to people like Margaret and her sister Emily, who back in the day worked at the cannery and they knew how to shuck crabs. And I don't know if you guys have eaten a crab. I love eating crab. The thing that was holding me back is like, how do you get in there and get that delicious meat out? And then how do you do, let's say, 3 dozen crab in an hour and then can it so they have enough to can? Well, you got to learn some lessons from people who know. And Nani Margaret came in and showed us how to shake crab. And this is a picture of a classroom. This is my classroom. And for an hour and 15 minutes, it was a crab shucking, blitz. And then it was cleaned up and sterilized, put back in place, because I got a Math 10 class coming in at the end of it. So like teachers know that logistics are the key to anything. If you're not working in a designated space or anyway, logistics. This is a favorite slide of mine. Hey, Shell, this is last week, actually. So this has very little to do with my program. This has to do with working with local food being normalized in our school. And top left, we have the Hodkill teacher using the facilities on the school to process fresh caught sockeye from this year. And kids got the knives, kids got the bowls and the hoses, and we're working on fish together. And on the top right, there's the Strong Start, so the very youngest ones. I mentioned we had 70 kids in the high school. This is our first year where we are now an amalgamated school. We got 170 kids from Strong Start to 12. And so it's wonderful to walk out of my classroom, and I was actually planting potatoes with my garden and gather class, and to my left were the Hodkill students working on fish, and to my right were the Strong Start students getting their first touch at working with fish, with Shelly's good friend Tammy working on canning some spring salmon. Super neat little thing. We took all that offal from all those two projects and used them as the nutrient source for the potatoes. And so like local nutrients in a very tight circle, growing the fall's potatoes. And I don't know, it was just neat. Shelly, can I turn this one to you?
You bet. I just think that's also amazing. And yeah, I think Dan has so much support from like all the way up to administration and principals and the culture here, the families that are our knowledge keepers. And like the local food to school program is, I would say, a nonprofit, grassroots nonprofit organization. So out in community, outside of academia, and we really were born a little bit from PHABC, Farm to School, like all these funders back 10, 15 years ago. And we really set our eyes on how do we keep this food flowing into schools. And so we have 7 schools on the island that we source the food for. But it's almost like, what do you need? Some schools need the food, some schools need knowledge keepers, some schools need support with like working and processing on food. So we just kind of find what schools need to do for to keep the stuff that Dan's up to. Like I see Emmy O'Gorman's on the call, and I have fond memories of past years where the prawns were coming up from Sandspit, Kilcoon, and we dropped a load off to her, and she was able to teach so much with the prawns and the children there. And so every school is different, every meal program's different, but I think that nonprofit connection is a helpful thing. So we run 2 local food pantries, we call them. Our job is to source local food, process it, and deliver it to meal programs on the island with a specific focus of schools and a secondary to hospitals and beyond. Um, and we have staff. We have 4 people working part-time jobs in this, and we have spaces like community kitchens and equipment, and that's been like a slow build as well, right alongside Dan. And if we just go to the next slide, Dan, um, I feel like it's just important to end with how much oversight all of this has by Haida knowledge keepers. You know, like it's almost it's a little bit nervous for me to even speak about traditional food without that basket. There is the eye of our Haida Foods Committee. They're always watching over what we're doing and what we're saying, and protocols on how we're doing it. So you're seeing Joanne Jovanovic, Indigenous principal of SD50, May Russ, longtime food harvester, Secretariat of the Haida Nation, and sat on our Haida Foods Committee for many years, guiding our work. And then that little circle with a big group of us, that's our team of people sourcing local food and getting into schools doing deliveries, including Margaret there, who's our Haida elder we lost last year. And then Elizabeth Moore, who really provides and helps come up against some of the legislation around food safety and Wildlife Act. It's like we need HIDA representation to manage some of the guidelines that prohibit some of the work we're involved in. And so I just have such a big howa. Gwen Edgars is not pictured here, and Missy McDonald, but there's these HIDA women that really oversee all this work and guide to make sure we're doing things in a good way. And so I think we're ready to pass it over to questions, unless Dan has a final word there, but thank you.
Thanks, Shell. Yeah, maybe I'll just take a little moment. I'll advance to the last slide that I have. I believe that so I provided 3 links that'll show up in the chat. The first one is to a online free PDF of this book. And that quote that I read earlier, and a lot of these images that I've used as the slideshow are in there. What else is in there is were ways that we use the greenhouse in classes beyond the garden and gather. So like for our art and photography, go in there, draw a leaf, draw a flower, find something to draw, to photograph. Math. Obviously a beautiful place to get a hands-on experience of perimeter versus area versus volume. Mamma mia. Conversions, feet, inches into metric, ratio, scale drawing, graphing, growing tomato plants, growing lettuce plants. Anyway, there's a ton of connections that the foods program can number of ways that the foods program can come into your math, science, socials, English, arts programs, and a lot of those are listed in this book. Again, just click on the link, wait for it a while. It's a fairly large PDF file, and then you can download it, save it, and then you got a soft copy, print it off, and you got a hard copy. There's also 2 other links that will be in the chat. They're both to Vimeo videos. One of them is one that Shelly brought into fruition. It's about the program at large. And the other one is focused really on the Garden and Gather program at our school here. And so if you are at all interested in finding out more about what we talked about, then those would be the first 3 sources that I send anybody to. And they're actually very visually appealing and high interest, much more interesting than us. Shelly did bring in a good point. For any teacher, you're going to need the buy-in of your administration, and they're going to have to support you with FTE time. Derek and I did it out of we loved it. We were doing it anyway. And so there was no problem for us to go and get an extra deer on the weekend and bring it to the school to use as materials then for a class on it, right? But what that provides is one deer, one touch, one experience. With the help of administration and with the help of Shelly, we're able to get 10 deer in. And so you can not only have the experience the first time, but you can actually pick up a lot of skill if you do it 10 times, right? And so having that help and that collaboration is a key to success in my experience. I mentioned, so just for the teachers in the house, it is an elective, and so that's important. The students that are attending want to be there, ideally. And, I try and limit it for myself because I like to keep it super hands-on. I like to keep it around 10. I got 18 this semester, which is a lot, right? If I'm trying to get everybody doing something, then I need at least 3 different rings in this circus, right? And then you divide them up. And then, if we're working with knives and stuff like that, then obviously I need to be in one place a lot more, unless you have senior students who have taken it 3, 4 times even, and then they can be the safety aspect of my responsibility as a teacher. There's a lot of different nuances that, frankly, you'll figure out as you go. Start small, start with something that you can manage and or have somebody there to help you manage. And if you like it and if it's working, then you build from there. And it's a as a 25-year educator, my favorite time in the week is when I have my garden and gather class. It's crazy. It's super busy. It's the largest slice of my workload, but it's my favorite one. And honestly, the relationships that I've built within the community and with my students is not a small part of the benefits that I get from the program. I think it is time for questions and answers.
They're coming in, Dan. They're coming
Okay,
in.
what do we got? I'm gonna stop sharing, I think is what I have to do.
I see Bernadette has asked the million-dollar question is, do we pay for deer? Which I feel like is a complex question and answer. Over the years, we have always traded reimbursement of gasoline and bullets and people's time for going out on deer for the deer. It's such an expensive endeavor. I think there's just so much to hunting and getting on the land. And so there is a wildlife act that makes it illegal to buy deer. So you do have to balance like the law with what does food security look like on the land that you're on. And so many conversations with, I would say, conservation officers, Council of the Haida Nation, and how to navigate that. But I would say the short answer is we do reimburse every food harvester in this food program because it's the right thing to do. Indigenous people have the right to make a modest living off their traditional food. And we really are guided more from the Haida Nation and what to do on their land. But we are like so conscientious and familiar with some of the regulations that prevent it. So it's a balancing act. Um, and I would say that that's what I'm going to say about deer.
As what I would add to that, you know, before Shelly was bringing us large amounts of deer, we would have a few that were donated. I would donate. I buy my tags. I go out and get my deer. And if I have a good hunt and I have an extra one, then or I'm short a lesson plan, then I'll bring it in and I donate it. And we are blessed here on Haida territory that we have an abundance of local food still available to us, and it's super important to appreciate it. And part of it, is sharing it. And there were, back in the day, there were several people who I could count on. If in the season, I could say, hey, if you ever get one, an extra one, then let me know. And these were tagged deer that, were donated.
Wow.
Shell, I think there's another one for you about,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Food safety, the other big sort of the big question. And I have a feeling it might be from an environmental officer, but I'm not sure. So yeah, we have the pantry follows food safety plans. We've developed them with environmental health officers. We also work with cut and wrap facilities with deer that are provincially inspected, as well as CFIA processing fish plants on island. So we deal with a lot of like legislation around food safety. Okay, you're not an environmental. I have a lot of environmental health officers around me in this office. All people that have actually supported the work, but it's also a battle, right? A lot of legislation questions the food safety of traditional food and traditional food processing ways. And I think that comes from not knowing and understanding where, the depth of knowledge and brilliance of traditional food ways of harvesting from indigenous people who have been doing it for years. So I think two things is that we've worked with Western knowledge around food safety with environmental health officers in my role, as well as we're trying, we're really elevating traditional knowledge to be as equal to and safe as that. And so we were able to follow ways, and we've haven't had anybody get sick, and this food is like so nourishing to the body. So, like top things, good hand washing, good sanitation in the classroom, sourcing food from and keeping fresh source food from the land cold and on ice, developing systems of coolers, all of that really helps. And I would also say always having an indigenous person, overseeing the process of bringing traditional food in. And and I had one more thought, but I'm forgetting. So I'm going to um,
I'll jump in.
yep.
These are absolutely part of the lessons, and I do understand that. I'm from Toronto. I grew up in Toronto. Okay, so there was a learning curve for me. I've been on Haida Gwaii for, I guess, 16 years now, and in those 16 years, I've learned so much from local people, and that's the lesson. But it's also like those are the lessons, those are the important parts, like how to keep your catch fresh, and then what to do with it and how to work with it safely. Like the knives, would be unfathomable. I've had people say that, like, you work with knives, and I'm like, I work with a lot of knives. Like there's knives around my classroom and they're sharp. And it's just, like instead of banning them and taking them away, it's a lesson on how to use a knife sharply, because guess what? These kids, a lot of the kids will go to post-secondary schools. They'll go down to the mainland. Some won't, and that's fine. A lot of those people that go down the mainland will come back, and that's is just part of here. Do you understand? Like place-based learning is based in the place where you are, and this is the place where we are, and this is the work, and this is the lives of our students and their families. And so to have, at least a part of their schooling, which actually prepares them for that, or helps them be prepared for that, is, I feel like, a duty that I am in trust of being an employee at a school. So I do understand that it, doesn't fit for everybody, and that it may seem a little bit strange, but it is definitely from here. Nani Shar, oversaw our work in the school while she was still an EA here. And so many of the protocols that we follow in the school, in the classroom, are from her. And, it like, yeah, it's good. There was a question about what kind of facilities do we have. As far as my classroom goes, we've got a greenhouse, we've got hanging facilities, we've got stainless steel tables, we've got knives, we've got a smokehouse, we've got a dehydrator, we've got a canner. Super cool kinetic molecular theory connection with pressure canners, right? Science teachers, like, boom. We've got an industrial vac packer. Obviously, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 freezers. We've got an updated kitchen this year that has, what do you call that? Restaurant grade stoves, a cooktop. Sorry, ovens was the first one. Cooktop.
Deer
Those are the,
hang, deer hang. We built a deer hang together. That was
yeah,
fun.
yeah.
And I would say, like, just to say, like, the local food pantries, I'm going to say, are humble kitchens. They are sort of food safe small kitchens in community, but they aren't these fancy industrial, like, restaurant kitchens. We do a lot of work with a humble start, and we're constantly looking for money to upgrade our facilities. But like Dan says, we also have like canners, food processors, vacuum sealers, dehydrators. We got a freeze dryer. Been doing a lot of that. I put something in the chat that I'll speak to. And Dan, do you see that question that Margot put in?
Yeah, so this year I went through, I was nudged by my principal. I had a student teacher, and my principal tracked me down and said, "It's time." And what he was talking about is formalizing the Garden and Gather course that we've run kind of locally, formalizing it into first a board approved, and we are, I would even say now, 90% along the way of getting it ministry approved. Um, what that looks like is grabbing a template, and instead of cutting and pasting, I had the time, and so I delved into it, and I tried to make the board approved course outline as authentic as I could while still being a professional. And in my opinion, unfortunately, the Ministry of Education didn't approve it as it was, because I had written it as basically a 10 to 12 course that a student could take 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 in 5 different grades if it fit into their schedule, and if they, of course, they wanted. My rationale is, hey, you don't learn to throw a 3-pointer and then you've got it. You got to practice it and practice it and practice it to become better at it. And the same is with food processing. And so that was my rationale between saying, hey, let kids take it more. There's always more knowledge and expertise that can be layered on to an introduction a first grab. The ministry wanted that one course split into actually 6 different courses, with, of course, then 6 different write-ups. And what it ended up looking like, what it ends up looking like is a rubric where you've got la, 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 la. And that's fine. I have no problem with that. If that's what they need, that's great. Um, I just don't want any of you to use like one of those as a template. Like, I'd rather you got the amalgamated original one and looked, because all the information that's in that amalgamated original one is interspersed into the other 6. And I don't know about you, but if I look at 6 different documents, my eyes blur after the first 1.5, frankly. So if you're going to read one, I'd like you to read that. Like, you can gain the most, you can glean the most out of that first original one. And I think it's already in the Margot. It's already in the group share.
By my unmute button. Yes, it should already be. We'll share it again in the group chat or the group email. So make sure you're on that if you want to have access to that. We'll share it again. It's already been shared, I think, in there, but we'll share it again to make sure everybody who's new joining there has access to that.
And I'll just add that I know I see Jess Hart's on the call as well, and I put in the FNHA canning guide, and like, we consider this the provincial standard for how the times and temperatures and pressures for a lot of traditional food. We really lean on this resource, and yeah, I think we need more coming from different places that help guide this work for resources, but really the knowledge is in community. I think these things are a way to formalize it and give you confidence when you're coming up against legislation. But I just, like, over our 20 years working in community, the knowledge that's in community is just so priceless and amazing.
To Bernadette Mullen, if you're asking for my permission to use anything, the answer is yes. Please.
Thank you so much, Dan and Shelly. Does anyone have any, you can feel free to unmute. We've got a few last minutes. If anyone has any other questions that you didn't put in the chat and you just like to unmute yourself and just ask. I'm seeing so many requests come in to join the email group, which is really exciting. I'm really excited to see that. There's some great resources being shared on there. So that's exciting to see so many people wanting to join there.
Margaret, I'm just going to pop one more resource that kind of builds on some of this discussion in the chat, which is a guide created by Chef Andrew George and Jared Costanahan Williams in partnership with Feed BC that also kind of tackles some of this conversation around incorporating Indigenous foods into institutions. So just one more resource in the chat there for folks.
That's awesome. Thanks so much, Megan. Great. Okay, so thank you again so much to Daniel and Shelly. We're so grateful for you being able to join the webinar today and sharing some of your knowledge and lived experience and taking us through sort of, the process that you went through. It's incredibly inspiring. I've noticed that from this webinar and the two previous webinars. I think a lot of this work, there's a lot of aspects to consider. And I think that's hearing other people's inspiring stories and hearing that it's such a process and you can continue to build slowly, and just to see where other organizations and other schools have gotten to is incredibly inspiring. So I'm so grateful for you for sharing your story, and so grateful for everyone for joining today. Again, we'll be sending a follow-up email. You'll want to get your post-webinar survey completed so that we are able to get you in that draw for the 10 of the $1,000 field trip fundings. And then we'll be following up for you with links where you can join the group conversation so that you can get some of these resources and stay involved in the chat. Dan and Shelly are both on that conversation. So if you do have any additional questions that come up, feel free to share them in that chat. I'm going to go to Emmy Gorman with one last thought before we jump off.
Hi, Dan and Shelly. Thanks for speaking so well today. It was wonderful to have you representing the district. I'm just wondering, it is crabbing season, and I've worked at three different schools, and at each of the schools, when we have gone crabbing, we have had an issue with staff and students having allergic reactions to the vapors in the air. And Dan, it just kind of reminded me when you were talking about doing it in your classroom. Do you have any advice besides doing it all outside, which is what I do now? But do you have any advice or on how to sort of navigate that respectfully to people that may? It just seems like a very, very common issue in my teaching.
Yeah, we had for whatever a cycle like 5-year, 8 through 12, there was a student that had a shellfish allergy. And so, yeah, either you don't do it or you do it, like you say, outside. And so then, like working with local foods, I don't know, my whole approach to Garden and Gather is, like figure it out, workarounds. It's such a great exercise in troubleshooting and, okay, well, here's the issue. How do we go around it? Things that pop into my mind, I do it in my greenhouse. You know what I mean? Like I've got a greenhouse that's covered. So if it's raining, I'm on tables, stainless steel tables in the greenhouse. So we're covered. That's not possible. Can you string a tarp? Do you have a tent? Any overhang structure, that you can set up your station? What do you need to process crab safely, right? You need a clean surface. You need clean bowls. If you're using the knackers, like really you need a clean surface and access to water and bowls and a means of cleaning up. You're down in Sandspit. Like, do you got any lean-tos? You got a greenhouse, right? Could you do it in there?
Yeah,
and
we cooked octopus in the greenhouse recently for that reason. It was more, I guess, that sometimes I find myself not processing, in particular, seafood because of one allergy, and then I have, in some cases, 80 students who might be missing out on that experience. I suppose it's akin to a peanut allergy in a school. So, yeah, okay, thanks. That's great.
All right. That brings us to 4:30. So again, thank you so much to Shelly. Thank you to Daniel. Thank you for everyone for joining today. And we'll be sending the follow-up email in the coming days. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.